study session, but Becky, would you just go through the roll so we know who is here?
Councilmembers Huff.
Here.
Perkins. Stewart.
Here.
DeLucy.
Here.
Steinmeier.
Here.
Hobart.
Here.
Mayor Weir.
Here. Okay, so we have everybody but Perkins. Okay. We'll just go ahead and get started and try to work through this the best that we can.
Is it being broadcast? Does it need to be?
Yes. Steve,
I don't know if
it's live on YouTube right now.
Okay.
Okay. So are we ready to proceed? Okay. The first presentation, Mr. City Manager, is development of future electric source at Independence Power and Light. Yeah, you're muted. We'll just assume you're going to introduce Jim Nail and go ahead with the presentation. Mr. Dale.
Evening, Mayor Weir, council members, city manager. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this item up for your discussion. I'll just go right to the presentation. Our discussion tonight is on the future of generation at Independence Power and Light. Over the past few years, consultants have provided a number of studies and plans concerning the energy portfolio at Independence Power and Light. As you all know, in 2019, the decision was made to retire the Blue Valley plant. Subsequent to that, last January, the council directed city manager to evaluate and make recommendations for the eventual retirement of our combustion turbines. Currently, the council has another recommendation from the Public Utility Advisory Board to evaluate the options for developing generation resources. The purpose of this presentation is not to rehash all those previous studies, but to provide the council with staff's recommendations based on the current and projected state of the Southwest power pool market and the technologies best suited to support Independence's place in that market. Just as an overview, our power generation resources fulfill three purposes. First of all, there's energy, the amount of electricity that we need to serve our customers. There's capacity, that's the amount of electricity that our generators could produce per hour, how much electricity we could have just in case something else happened out on the grid and we had to rely on our own or our contracted resources. And then third is system reliability. Our generators, our generation fleet ensure that there's the right amount of electricity and voltage across the grid to support normal operations. All of these are important, and they're mandated by agreements or regulations that Independence is subject to, regardless of whether we're a member of Southwest Power Pool. All of our resources work together to meet one or more of these objectives. And the question before us is, what is the best combination to meet the needs of Independence both now and into the future? Just to go dig a little deeper into the three options that we have, we currently have capacity contract with Onetta. It only provides capacity, no actual electricity. And it was negotiated in a time when the prices were very favorable for us. So it met a need that we had at the time, and one that we'll have to evaluate going forward. Purchase power agreements and also shared ownership of outside resources, they provide capacity and energy to the market, that is. But they're outside of our local system, so they don't support the reliability of our system for our ratepayers. By having the energy as part of that purchase, agreement or the ownership, we do get credit for any energy that they produce when and if they're scheduled to generate. But we also have to pay a share of their operating expenses. And in the case of shared ownership, we share those costs whether the unit is running or not. So we get the capacity plus power, but at the additional cost compared to a capacity contract. On-system generation offers energy, capacity, and supports system reliability here within our footprint. The power produced within our footprint, it meets all these objectives. We bring power into Independence through multiple paths. We have 9 interconnections with our neighbors in Evergy and Associated Electric. Any one of those paths could be interrupted at any time due to storms, high load conditions, outages on their systems. Having generation capability within our footprint gives us the capability to shift loads or quickly provide alternate power without having to wait on those other utilities to come to our aid when it's convenient for them. Also, similar to a purchase power agreement, we do receive credit from Southwest Power Pool for any energy that these resources produce, and that offsets our cost of operation. Previous reports have identified the cost advantage of using capacity contracts or purchase power contracts to meet our short-term needs. However, there are some important changes in the economic scenario that need to be considered. One of the reasons that capacity has been cheap is due to the abundance of older plants with capacity in excess of their needs. Those plants are being retired. Just last year, we saw the report that 2 of the utilities in our region were accelerating the retirement of their coal plants. As this excess capacity is removed from the system, the cost for contracting the remaining capacity will only go up. Purchase power agreements will face the same impact. As the demand rises and the amount of the available of excess capacities out there goes down, when our current contracts end, we'll have to pursue not only replacing capacity, but the energy we need as well. That too is going to be more expensive. Now, some would argue that as these coal plants retire, there's new projects coming on which are replacing it. And in fact, this graph would look like the new generation being added even exceeds that's being retired. The problem is the mix of energy. If you look at this graph, the green color is all it's wind. While the wind, you may have, let's say, 100 megawatts of wind. As far as capacity is concerned, the reliable amount that you can depend on, they only get accredited a small portion of that. So the actual capacity that's available to market is going down. Now, these wind projects are out there, and you do see them being announced. A number of different utilities have projects that are pending. However, none of these projects are local to the Independence area. So in addition to the cost of contracting for capacity or energy or even shared ownership, we would also face the increased cost of ensuring the transmission capability from the generation site back to Independence. Another issue with wind is that continued growth of wind and solar adds another complexity to the choice of technologies that we should consider. Southwest Power Pool has continued to increase the use of wind generation. The record right now is, I believe, 73.2%, which was one day in April of 2019. So that means that at one given time, 73% of the power being produced in Southwest Power Pool's entire region was coming from wind farms. However, this graph shows that that's not a consistent, reliable output. What you see here is a 48-hour window that's very typical of the wind pattern across the Midwest. It dies off in the morning, comes back in the evening, through the night, then dies the next morning again, only to come back in the afternoon. The black line shows your wind generation. The blue line shows what that does to prices. When wind is abundant, prices drop. When the wind falls away, prices spike back up again. Now, wind currently enjoys tax advantages or setbacks that help it to ride through those low price periods and do so and still make money. However, that volatility then creates a niche that independents can take advantage of. Renewable resources, like I said, are constitute an ever-growing share of Southwest Power Pool's capacity, but they only run when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. SPP has to rely on other resources to fill that gap. As I showed on the previous slide, there can be a significant percentage, but a significant change across the course of the day. So Southwest Power Pool coordinators have to look for resources that can fill that gap, either by remaining online at low power or able to start up and ramp up quickly when the need is great. Generation resources that wish to participate either have to ride through those low price periods or shut down until the conditions are right for them to run. Unfortunately, large steam and combustion plants are not designed to operate that way. Anything running off of a steam boiler or very large turbines, they're designed to ramp up to high power and then stay there for days at a time or weeks at a time. Any effort that they have to spend in, if they shut down or if they go to low power, bringing their plant back up to operating conditions, that fuel doesn't generate any electricity or megawatts that they can sell, so it's just an added cost. Running at low loads is their least efficient mode and actually increases their operating cost at a time when they have fewer megawatts to sell and when the price is the lowest of the day. The result is that many baseload plants do not get scheduled to run unless the conditions will allow them to run for days at a time. As wind and solar continue to increase, Southwest Power Pool is going to rely more and more on fast response units that are designed to start quickly, operate efficiently across a wide range of output. And those are what we refer to as peaking units. They're dispatched on short notice and they're able to respond quickly in times of peak demand. Previous reports have shown that our existing combustion turbines still have some remaining cost-effective life. The Energy Master Plan that was presented estimated that at 5 to 10 years with minimal maintenance expense, but that was 2 years ago. So now we're looking at about a 3 to 8 year window in which to not only make the decision for the direction of power and light, but to obtain the systems and put into place whatever replacements or contracts are decided to be best for independence. The combustion turbines that we currently have, they do come with operating and personnel expenses, but when they do run, they do provide an offset to that cost, at least in part. Plus, replacing that capacity, if we were to decide to just retire them, replacing that capacity with an increase in the Onetta contract, which again, I remind you, was negotiated at a time when prices were very favorable for us. Even with that contract, replacing that existing capacity would cost us an additional $3 million annually, plus an estimated $37 million in transmission system upgrades in order to maintain our current level of system reliability. The timeline that's shown here is not very precise. That's because it depends greatly on what type of solution is decided that we need. Obviously, if we decide that we need to go with contracts, that's a much different timeline. But if we decide that we do need new on-system generation, then you have to go through environmental permitting, which can take 18 to 24 months, interconnection approval from Southwest Power Pool. You see a lot of different numbers there. Southwest Power Pool has a generation replacement project. If you decide you're going to replace existing generation with an equal amount, up to a year before the retirement of that plant, you can put in a request to have it included in this replacement study and get kind of fast-tracked on the approval process. If you're not in that window, then it goes into their queue of system requests, which right now they are still evaluating requests that were submitted in 2017. They are attempting to improve that process and to weed out some of the projects that may have been kind of pie in the sky just in case type of studies and focus on the ones that are really likely to bear fruit. but that pipeline is still a long time. Delivery and installation, again, depends greatly on what type of system is determined to be the choice. But 18 to 24 months, once you green light the purchase of the equipment, 18 to 24 months to have it in operation. Now, with all this, some of this can be done in parallel. Some of it you would have to wait and do sequentially. But that 3 to 8 year time frame that we're looking at right now, it could very well take a good part of that before we would have a system on the ground and generating, if that's the choice. Now, just to put this in perspective, we tabulated some examples of costs of the different choices that are out there. One of the things that you've heard mentioned before are internal combustion or reciprocating engines. The brand name you may remember is Wartzilla. These are reciprocating piston-driven engines that drive a generator. The Energy Information Agency, EIA, every year they put out a study of what their expected capital costs and comparing the technologies. Right now, or the 2020 report, the internal combustion engines were estimated at $1.8 million per megawatt. That's per megawatt. And then there's additional fixed and variable operating costs associated with that. A combustion turbine, single cycle, similar to a jet engine technology, that's referred to as an aeroderivative. Those turbines are estimated at 1.175 million per megawatt. Combustion turbines, the large industrial heavy frame turbines like we currently have, those are estimated at 0.713 million or 713,000 per megawatt, which sounds a lot cheaper. However, the nominal plant to enjoy that type of economic benefit is over 200 megawatts. 237 is the nominal size that's quoted in the EIA report. A combined cycle plant, which takes the waste heat from the turbine and adds a steam generator on the end, that's estimated at just a little over $1 million a megawatt. But again, in order to enjoy the benefits of that scale, a nominal plant of about 418 megawatts. A plant like Dogwood, which has 2 turbines and then the steam generator, the nominal size that was reported in the 2020 study is now over 1,000 megawatts at just under $1 million a megawatt. For comparison, because we know there is an interest in green initiatives, a biomass plant, 50 megawatt biomass plant, that comes in at over $4 million a megawatt. A solar photovoltaic plant of 150 megawatt size is about 1.3 million per megawatt. And a battery storage facility, which is only 50 megawatts that lasts a capacity of about 4 hours, is again about 1.4 million per megawatt. And again, only lasts 4 hours before you have to find another generation resource to replace it. Putting all these into comparison, our staff, we feel that the aeroderivative turbine with its fast start and fast ramp capability fits very well into the Southwest Power Pool market. We have been contacted by one vendor who's offering refurbished certified turbine of 50 megawatts, and the package price would be about 37 million. So a significant discount over the numbers that are quoted here. In summary, our staff recommends that we procure new on-system generation, that we target fast response peaking unit technology, which will support our requirements for energy, capacity, and system reliability, and will be an investment in the future. Second, we recommend that we initiate this as soon as possible, and I apologize, that should say 2021, but to support the anticipated retirements of our existing combustion turbines. Now, your support for this would not put a price tag on it at this time. What we would do is launch a request for proposals to determine what the best options are, an evaluation and award for those request of proposals would be brought before the council. Depending on the type of system that is requested, Southwest Power Pool's interconnection studies have a fee that's based on the size of the system. So if the decision was to go for something larger, then that funding approval would come before you. Our intent would be to draft the request for proposal to include the engineering contractor support, construction support. But if we were to determine based on those that it would be in our best interest to have a separate EPC contractor, we would also bring that before the council. And finally, the selection and approval of the funding method. Obviously, this is a large ticket item. For example, the one that was brought to us would be 37 million. Depending on the size of this project, it could go up into several hundred million, depending on what the council would decide as the appropriate course. Pending your questions, that's our presentation.
Okay, there you go. Comments or questions from the council?
Yes.
Mr. Nail, this is Karen DeLucci. And do you have time later this week to meet with me? Because I did not understand half of your presentation. I'm watching it and I'm also listening to it on my phone. And it's very critical that I fully understand it. And I think I need to sit with you one-on-one with Mass if it's possible.
That is absolutely possible, and I'm available to you anytime.
Thank you.
Councilman Huff.
Yes. Jim, like I've discussed with you previous times about a little more concerned about having base load rather than peak load. I don't have any problem with what you have up there, other than I would like to look into that base load, the Wardzillas. I see the price tag you have on there, and I realize that the prices you have here is none of them's been negotiated. That's just
correct.
The bill. When you're talking about, one's Wardzilla or one of these other ones, and you jump up to the 1,000 megawatts, and the price, everything changes. I'm glad you see that we do need something other than wind and solar, and people need to understand that, we need base load here, and I do believe we need to generate here. I think it's just a matter of you and staff deciding which is the best thing for us. We do have, our portfolio is fantastic. We have a little bit of everything. We're out there everywhere. If we have a failure, we could usually pick it up someplace else. But the retirement of the coal-fired ones are really going to have an impact. People need to understand that Colorado just shut one down last week. It wasn't due to be shut down. We have these other ones that's going to do it, and then sooner or later we're going to get into a base load issue, as you well know. And appreciate your presentation there. I would like to see you look into the base load a little bit more than just, and I know this is just giving direction to look into these things and see what the best thing is for this city. But I appreciate your time.
Councilman, I did do some research this afternoon to look into, for the units in our area, what is their run experience. A baseload plant, as you referred to, a baseload plant is either a large individual plant or a fleet of smaller units, like either combustion turbines or the Wardzilla engines. But the intent of a baseload plant is that it's providing a significant amount of power, running a considerable portion of its available time. Now, for the past year, like Nebraska City 2, Iatan 2, they've been running in the 80 to 85% range. So their capacity factor is very high, which allows them to spread their costs over a lot of megawatt hours and take advantage of those scales of economy of scale. The Dogwood plant is also considered base load plant. its capacity factor the past year has only been 40%. So it's not profitable for it to run during periods where it's not as favorable because either the wind is abundant or they can't start up fast enough. So their capacity factor, they're only running about 40%. We asked Tenaska, our marketing partner, we asked them to do an analysis of this aeroderivative turbine based on its operating characteristics and the real market conditions that we've seen for the past 3 years. Tenaska's estimate is that aeroderivative turbine would have run 30%. So for a great deal less cost than a dogwood facility, we could have turbines running 5-6 times more than the current H units run now. And at a much better heat rate, so a much better cost margin for us. So the potential.
What's the warranty with that being a refurbished, or what kind of guarantees do we have? It's kind of like buying a used car, or and that kind of concerns me. Not that if it comes with a warranty, or I realize you can spin a turbine anytime, and just wondering what kind of maintenance agreement or what goes with that.
Well, these are similar to some of the certified pre-owned deals that you can get, like with a car. They take this, they'll take this unit, they strip it down, they rebuild it to its original specs. Now, granted, it'll have some life on it, and we wouldn't know what until we actually got ready to place an order with them. Then they would go find a unit, they would recertify it, refurbish it, and then we would negotiate with them at that point.
Understand. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Mike Steinmeier. Mr. Nail, appreciate the time and the information that you brought forward tonight. At some point, I think we have to have a conversation that involves, or at least details, our city's hopeful demand moving forward with the current customers that we have that would like to expand their operations, that are going to have energy requirements beyond what we have the ability to provide, as well as be attractive to future capital investment from companies that would like to look at independence as a possible landing point. So I know Councilmember Huff would probably be able to speak more into this, but at some point we have to talk about, are we just looking to provide enough energy for what we currently have, or are we going to have a long-range discussion with some goal setting for the economy, our local economy here as well?
Councilman, there's two parts to that discussion. First of all is an understanding that as a member of the Southwest Power Pool integrated market, we no longer generate the power that our customers use. We may generate it locally, but the net effect is we buy all of our power from Southwest Power Pool. Then anything that we generate or that we contract for, that then becomes an offset on that cost of that power that we do purchase. So really the question then becomes, what is the best way to manage the capacity factors, the system reliability, and to look at systems that will give us some potential revenue generation. It's really separate from the load issue. The load issue really becomes a factor for maintaining our transmission and distribution system to make sure that we can deliver the power everywhere that our customers need it.
And I agree with that. I know we have obligations on one side of it, but my greater concern is, what are we going to leave the next generation of Independence residents in terms of the of our ability to be, again, attractive to capital investment for companies that would like to come in and see. They're going to, if we have certain companies that require large amounts of energy, are we going to be competitive, or are we just going to be just take the posture that, well, we're going to meet our obligations, generate enough power for our residents, for the businesses that we currently have? Or are we going to be aggressive? Are we going to look at this in the long term and say, if we're going to spend this money, are we going to do it in a reasonable manner that's going to produce something back to us, to put people to work, to bring jobs, to bring capital investment, and keep our rates at the lowest possible levels for our ratepayers, so that this is a place where people want to land and establish roots and live. And that's my greater concern. So I'd like, while I love all the things that we're saying, I'm just going to be like a resounding gong. I'm going to keep asking this question. I'm going to keep saying it over and over again until we at least have an honest and economic conversation on, what we should be thinking, how we should be thinking, and what we're willing to think about in the long term here.
Certainly, sir.
Mr. Nail, let me just make sure that we have some of the terminology consistent, because I think sometimes that it tends to get confusing. When we talk about base load, is that what you have put in your presentation as energy?
Well, it's used in two ways. One, our base load is that consistent minimum level of power that we need to meet day in and day out. Really, it doesn't take into account the spikes of the summer. It's that consistent load across the year. That's your base load. A base load plant or base load generation system is one that's designed to run that way, to run consistently, run day in and day out, and supply that load.
Okay. Okay, because I that's something that we hear, base load versus capacity. And I just want to make sure everybody, is clear in understanding what that is.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Could you tell her what the base load is right now, average for Independence? So that kind of gives us a little idea, so we might be able to clarify that a little bit more for people that's not been involved in this too much. I know she has been a bunch, but it'd be nice that we know what our base load is.
If you're looking at just that kind of the minimum load that runs day to day across the whole year, it's probably in the 145 to 150 megawatt range. And then during the winter and then during the high heat of the summer, it can spike up to the high 200s. And of course, our all-time peak is 315. So we within our city, we do have a large variation in the load that we cover.
So to generate that, and I'm not putting you on the spot for a number, but from what they told us, it's about $1 million per megawatt to generate that when we're talking about generation. So if we wanted to generate that all on our own without pulling from SPP, I mean, I know I'm not saying that correctly, because what you said, I mean, it's like depositing your paycheck in the bank. That, that money gets loaned out to people, gets invested. They don't hold it in an envelope with your name on it in the vault. So that's how I think of SPP in very simplistic terms, is we make deposits into the system and then we make withdrawals from the system, and they don't have our megawatts with our names on it in an envelope to deliver back to us. Is that a good way of saying that?
Yes, Mayor. And the number you said earlier is, if you look at the chart of information the addendum that we provided, those are just overall estimates, a survey done by Sergeant and
Yeah.
EIA.
Like I said,
and it's 1 to 1.5.
Yeah.
1 to 1.5 is a good estimate. per
About
megawatt.
Okay. So, two things. One, to your point, I certainly think obviously we need to take some time to get a great understanding of this, but we can't take too much time. We've essentially already made a commitment to this in the master energy plan that the council adopted, is that we need to start exploring alternatives to our current system. I mean, we've made that decision. We closed Missouri City, we've closed Blue Valley, we've closed Blue Valley, we're depending on these CTs. So this train has already left the station with the council's approval. And it's going to take us some time to come up with a funding plan and be able to dedicate resources to this replacement. And we're already 2 years into that. So we do need to make a decision, and this council is going to make a decision that's going to affect this city for generations. So we just have to get comfortable with that responsibility. Or else we're going to have a real problem in 3 to 5 years. So, we have a great opportunity and responsibility. To Councilman Steinmeier's point, and I completely agree that we need to be looking ahead to and have a vision of what we want to be and what we want to attract, and our ability to deliver an affordable, reliable utility to existing businesses who may want to expand into new businesses and our residents. My thought on that is we can obtain as much power as we need, but we have to have the infrastructure to deliver it. So that's an additional conversation. There's many areas out in the valley that we particularly, which is our growth area, because the system's built in town. I mean, it's, the system's built on the square and, out, on 39th Street. I mean, our system isn't fully built out near our solar farm on Salisbury or Bunchu Road, for example, and in areas out in the valley, like out by Lake City. And, we've had that on the capital improvements plan for a long time is, well, when somebody comes there and they need it, and there's a demand for it, then we'll build it. So I think that that's a separate but very related discussion. So I would just say again that the council is in the process of developing a strategic plan, and this is grist for the mill, I guess I would say. This is exactly why we do strategic planning, and this is something that I believe when we move on to our next phase of the strategic plan, which is going to be very soon in the next several weeks, that these are the types of discussions that would be very appropriate for that time to talk about the long-term consequences of these decisions, and also understanding that these are not just decisions that 7 people can make, but are going to require a conversation with our business community, our economic development corporation, certainly citizens, and the community needs to make a commitment and guide us in this decision making, because it's going to be in place for a long time. It's going to take a lot of money and planning, and once we start down this course, we can't change our mind in 3 to 5 years. So Does anybody else have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I do. This is Dan
Yes.
Hobart. Mr. Nail, I am obviously no expert on this, but I read the internet probably too much. And last fall, I saw an article that said solar is now cheaper to build out than fossil fuel plants. And of course, there's all kinds of projections going forward that alternatives to fossil fuels energy are going to be dominant within 15 or 20 years. Can you state publicly if you have any sort of take on that, or if it, how that's going to factor into it? Of course, my primary concern is, and a lot of the discussion online is, do you invest in generation now, or do you invest in batteries and more alternative sources? So, what do you think?
Well, it's kind of an all of above answer, Councilman. Yes, the costs are coming down on solar technology. Some of that is still linked to the tax incentives and the setbacks that are afforded to solar and wind energy companies as compared to other types of resources. One of the biggest problems is the sheer size of the facilities that you need. I mean, our solar farm, all the acres that ties up, and that's only 11 megawatts. Last year, in the entire year, our solar farm generated just over 19,000 megawatt hours, which averages out to 54 megawatts a day. That's it. In order to get a sizable contribution from solar energy, you need many times more solar arrays out there in the field than what we have deployed. It's at this point, it's unknown what's the environmental cost of manufacturing all those panels, plus what do you do with them when it's time to replace them. And then you have the fact that the sun only shines so many hours a day, and here in Missouri in the winter, it may not even shine at all during the day. So in those conditions, you lose the output, and you have to have something else that's ready to pick up the slack. You did mention batteries. A California company partnering with Vista Energy just announced last week they are commissioning a 300 megawatt battery storage facility. That 300 megawatt storage facility still only has a 4-hour capacity before it's discharged. And it's almost 100,000 battery cells in order to achieve that. Again, what do you do with the heavy metals that are in there, and how expensive is that going to be when it's time to replace the cells? Those are all issues that you have to deal with for batteries. Batteries don't make power, they just store power. And wind, we've already had the discussion of wind. It's same limitations as solar. It's not a steady, dependable resource. That's why I feel that here in the Southwest Power Pool region, where we do have a lot of solar and wind capability, certainly out to the west of us, but within the Southwest Power Pool footprint, where Southwest Power Pool continues to have a need and will continue to have a need, is for those fast response units that can pick up that load and run efficiently in that style of operation.
And before anybody panics and thinks that I've got my mindset on, we got to go all solar or wind or alternative. That's not the case at all. What I am most concerned with is committing the city to $100 million spend that becomes useless halfway through the spend. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to get into a 30-year or 40-year commitment for the city, and all of a sudden, our natural gas assets are worthless. That's my big concern. Now, I fully admit, no one can predict the future. Like, I get that. We have the corollary. Well, I'll save that comment. You understand what I'm saying, though.
I do.
To the best of our ability, to consider where this puts the city. When they built our power plants in the 50s and 60s, look how long they lasted. Look, they set us up for a very, very long time. And that's what we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at 40 and 50 years from now, and what's the best decision to make for them. That's my take on it.
And what I can tell you, sir, I dug through a lot of APPA and EIA reports, and right now their projections only go out to about 2050, but through 2050 they show gas staying at about 38% of the portfolio. So they don't show a drop off at least through 2050.
Okay. All right. And so then the follow-up to that is, do you have an opinion on, I'm absolutely a novice on this issue, but do you have an opinion on the peaking versus the base load?
I do.
Do we have so what, tell me, please.
Right now, and again, I just base this off of looking at the plants that are around us, and obviously we're not going to build a coal plant. That's out the window. So the nearest base load plant that's gas powered around us is Dogwood, and Dogwood the past year only got to operate 40% of the time. With this new technology we've been offered for the aeroderivative turbine, it gives us the opportunity, and again, depending on how big we want to go, we could potentially generate close to the same amount of time as Dogwood does, but at a much less cost and much more flexibility.
Is that the deal you were talking about, that we got a chance that maybe if it's a good thing to buy the parts at a discount?
Yes, it was a 50 megawatt turbine for roughly $37 million. Now, and there's also potential deals out there with the reciprocating engines. The thing about the reciprocating engine technology is the largest size they have is 18 megawatts. So you buy as many of them as you think you need, but you only start up what you need at the time. So it gives you a great deal of flexibility and the ability to run those at their most efficient level. So again, the peaking units, it's the fast response and the high efficiency is what's appealing about those peaking units.
Okay. And Mr. Nail, this is Karen. Can a peaking unit be used as part of a base load? You keep making a distinction, and I'm wondering, is there a reason you're making that distinction? Can't we simply get the turbine that you were talking about and use it as a base load, or is that asking too much of the machinery?
It's going to depend on the machinery. Your reciprocating engines, it's just like your car. The more you run them, the more wear and tear you're going to have. So they're limited by the number of operating hours, or let's put it this way: there's maintenance requirements that are going to be triggered by those operating hours. The aeroderivative turbine, it's a lighter construction than the large frame turbines like we currently have at our substations. So they're not as rugged, but they run more efficiently. The harder you run them, the faster you're going to hit those maintenance windows. Let's just put it that way.
And part of the investigation you're talking about doing would include, like, I would be curious to know if any kind of turbine that we purchase can be used as part of our baseload requirement to maintain our participation status in the Southwest Power Pool?
Oh, Councilwoman, yes, absolutely. These all would contribute to our Southwest Power Pool obligations.
And so how much power are we looking at replacing? Is it 92 megawatts with our 6 turbines?
Our 6 turbines are currently credited at 94. So eventually, now, and again, whether we did that with a combination of capacity and generation, that's some of the research that we will owe you to help you make that decision. But certainly, if we had, let's just, for example, if we had a 50 megawatt turbine and then we bought two of those 18s, now you're at 86. We could put some of those at I, some of those at Blue Valley, and then you'd have you would have another 8 megawatts that you'd have to pick up somewhere. And that might be something we would use capacity contract for. So it can be a mix of those.
This is such a major purchase. I'm thinking even Bass Pro was only 72 million, and I'm hearing 100 million tonight. Has the PUAB allowed any kind of citizen participation or anything like that? Has there been hearings back down there? I don't know.
There's not been a hearing. At their last meeting, they just discussed the motion from one of their members to recommend that the council start pursuing the next generation. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Is we're going to be going out. Our intention is that we'll go out, we will solicit bids or proposals, and we will bring back to you the best information we can get so that we can help you make that decision.
Mr. Nail, I appreciate the info tonight. As everybody sort of echoed, this is a once in our lifetime decision to make. It's huge. It's also exciting, to think we're going to be a part of the future. But I appreciate the thought that you've put into it, and I guess I'm just excited to see what the next steps are. So thank you.
I'm excited to meet with you, Mr. Nail, in order to understand everything you said tonight.
Well, and I extend that offer to every single one of you. I will be more than happy to sit down and go through this because it is a lot of information, and there are a lot of nuances to it that are hard to get across in just a short briefing.
Jim,
okay.
Question on the not the Wardzillas, but the other one. What's the time frame of running? Being they are they good for weeks, months, or what are they recommending on that end of it?
They said that some of their refurbished units, similar to what they would offer us, have actually been out in the field running 30 to 40% of the time successfully.
30-40% of the time. Okay. One other thing, and I want everybody to understand this too, and I know you do, is that besides this fast one here with the 94 megs, we're going to have to cover one way or the other. It's right on the doorstep, like the mayor said, that this train's already left. So we're going to be dealing with the future of the whole place down there. That's what I was getting at earlier, that these coal plants all over the nation are retiring, and then we have a new administration up there that's definitely going to change a lot of things as far as fossil fuels and everything. So I think you'll see a lot of these people shut them down even earlier than what they're saying. And everybody needs to keep that in mind, that we have to cover. I'm thinking 225, 250 megawatts if we're going to jump out there and get into that end of it. As far as providing for the citizens here, and that's just the minimum. That's just what we have today. And just like the mayor and Councilman Steinmeier mentioned, we do have growth out there too. We can't invite people in here and then say, or like a Bitcoin, and they need so much power, or Lake City decide to come with us, and you go, well, it's nice that you want to come here, but we'll have to go out here and scratch and dig to find that power. Today we can do that. We know that. We know we can get power, but 10 years from now, that might be a different story. So, this is big time This is real big. Anyway, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
I'd like to follow it up real quick. And I'm not trying to question you, Councilmember Huff, at all, but would 200 to 250 megawatts, if that's what you're talking about, is that a power plant or is that turbines? What, Mr. Nail, what would we have to do to generate that much?
Well,
What would
it's
that be?
again, it's kind of an all of the above answer. We could have a mixture of turbines, reciprocating engines. You could put all your eggs in one basket and go with something large like a dogwood style plant. Or if you went like I said, in the SPP region, where the shortfall is right now is the ability to run efficiently for 2 to 4, 6 hours a day and shut everything off when the wind starts blowing. So you could have a collection of say these 50 megawatt turbines or the 18 megawatt Wärtsilä type engines. You could have as many as you felt you needed or could afford, and then you run what's the most efficient, what SPP calls on at the time.
So when the bigger we go, the more we go, is that not us jumping into sort of the power generation game, the whole industry? I mean, isn't that us really saying we can do power better than other people that
it's a risk.
That commit to the pool? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, we have to be able to generate the power cheaper than we can buy it from the pool. That's the goal, right?
If you want to depend on your own generation and run it consistently, then you need to be able to run it cheaper than SPP can buy it. You're correct, because SPP looks out across the entire region and they schedule what is the lowest cost offering at that given time. So
Right.
they'll look at tomorrow and say, we can't get any more from Dogwood's not available. Iatan and Nebraska City, they're already scheduled out. So the next best thing, let's start those H units over at Independence. Southwest Power Pool looks across the whole region to make that choice. And that's why they're able to offer to us the lowest cost energy that we can find. If we were out marketing this on our own, then we'd be subject to some of those spot prices that jump up. And your crystal ball is better than mine as far as trying to guess when those peaks are going to happen. Yes, getting generation, you are running the risk of it just sitting there, which is why the most efficient model that you can get is in your best interest. The other piece that you have to think about is the reliability piece. Because like you said, if we've got a bunch of customers out there in the Valley or Lake City and something bad happens at Hawthorne, like it happened back in the late 90s, we could lose a considerable source of power and we'd be stranded. Whereas if we have some generation in-house, we can selectively choose which critical pieces we decide to power back up while we're waiting on Evergy to bring the rest of it back. It's that flexibility.
Mr. Nail,
Yes, sir.
is it safe to say that when you're involved with a power pool during those peak times where the demands are the greatest and they're routing energy up from the south, there's, if we get into large scale demands and we have fewer facilities online because they're old and antiquated and they're shutting down, so the demand for the sourcing of power becomes greater and greater and greater. There's no guarantees that we're going to be provided with those power or with that power that we have in the moment. Is that correct?
Not sure I understand your question, sir.
So if we're buying energy from a power pool, okay,
right.
And in other words, we're not generating, we're buying, we're consuming. And we are experiencing a hot summer, and let's just say it's in the region of the same area that we're buying energy from. If the peak generation points and there's the strain on the grid down south, that doesn't mean they're just going to turn on our grid up here or generate more power up to us because we're asking for it. We'll essentially be at the mercy of the power provider in those moments like that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, to a degree. Southwest Power Pool, as our transmission service provider and our reliability coordinator for the region, they are constrained by NERC regulations to meet that demand and to have contingencies in place. Now, obviously, we can't predict what casualty might happen, which could temporarily disrupt power. But SPP, as our reliability coordinator, they have an obligation under NERC to have those contingency plans ready and to work with us to restore that balance throughout the region.
And I understand that. My point being is that we can sit back and be a consumer of a power source like that, which I know they have a contingency plan that doesn't guarantee you and I are going to see energy during peak demand load times, and especially if we have a natural disaster, we have something that takes place that requires energy to be directed towards an area. And so I wanted to hear your response on that, only to emphasize we can sit and be consumers, or we can make decisions to be generators and be able to be dependent upon our own decisions and our own demand. And but it does require investment. I get it. So I would much rather be in the position of providing for our residents rather than hoping that when we need it, it's available to us.
Well, and to your point, in the event of a contingency, if there is an outage in the region, right now there is a system of what we call black start generators, where individual utilities have the capability to start serving some or all of their own load while they wait on everyone else to get reconnected. You're right. If we don't have any generation resources, we've got nothing to, we would just have to wait it out until they got to us.
And I have sat in brownouts in California and grayouts, and they're not pleasant. So I don't wish that for anybody. I'd have to sit through, especially in some of the more hot and humid days of a Missouri summer. So these are things that we have to keep in mind, that with the new administration and having fossil fuels in their crosshairs, these are very real realities that could play out, and we should never say never, especially after 2020. So just food for thought.
Jim, this is Karen one more time. Was this presentation given at the PUAB yet?
No, at the last meeting, when they had their motion to recommend to the council to support the development, Power and Light staff, we wanted to make sure that we got in your hands the information you needed to start thinking about that.
Do you happen to know, can you present this to the PUAB? This, like, within the next couple of weeks? I don't know when their next meeting is.
Third Thursday of the month is their scheduled meeting. Certainly we could present it to them then as well.
Well, I'm just, like I said, Bass Pro was 72 million, the event center was 64 million, and we're talking about 100 million. And I really want as many smart people hearing all this information as possible. Plus, I know the PUAB has provision within their bylaws to allow citizens to make comment and ask questions. This is a big enough deal that I think we need to do that. We've got an obligation to the citizens to make a very good decision based on very good information. And the information will only be better with the dissemination of it and discussion of it. So if you could do that, that would be terrific.
We can certainly talk to the chairman.
As I said a few minutes ago, that this will require a lot of input from the community, including our Economic Development Corporation, our business community, the citizens. I hope, I mean, certainly the PUAB and likely perhaps some other boards and the commissions that are advisory to the council. And our next piece of business on the agenda is the bill 20705, which was postponed indefinitely last week. And I think, in a sense, probably did no harm because now we have this presentation and it gives this bill a little, certainly some more context. But certainly the PUAB has heard enough through our master energy plan and other actions that were approved by the council to guide us to start going in this direction. Mr. Nail, before I just segue into that, are there any other questions specific to Mr. Nail's presentation?
Yeah, I just, one quick comment. And we've got, council talking about 200 to 250 megawatts, and Mr. Nail said that's 1.5 million per megawatt. Karen, we're not looking at the 100 million. We're looking at 300 million.
I was never good at math, Dan.
So we're clear. Is my math correct, Mr. Nail?
Yes, but it could be anywhere in between. It all depends on what the final mix is that is determined to be best for Independence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just clarifying that for the folks watching and for Councilmember DeLucci, what
I do appreciate
is somewhat being advocated for. Mr. Nail, thank you.
Well, we have to do something or else we're going to be out of power in a few years. So the price tag is, dropping to some extent, even if it's 37 million, that's not, that's a large amount of money, but we really don't have a whole lot of alternatives other than, get out of the business, which I don't think that that's an option at this point either. So if there's nothing else, we will move on to the second item, which is the PUAB recommendation on development of future electric source. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, I have a functional microphone now, Mayor and members of the council. So this was an item, as the mayor mentioned moments ago, that was on the council's agenda last Monday evening. This was an item at that meeting that was postponed indefinitely. That said, given the fact that this did come as a recommendation from the Public Utility Advisory Board, and as it fits with this larger decision about power generation, we felt it was important to bring this item back for council consideration. It's going to be our recommendation that this item and the other two that you'll hear about this evening as well be brought back for the council to revisit and reconsider, but wanted to start that in a very transparent way by bringing these items to the council this evening at the study session, simply to give the council an opportunity, if they should so wish, to discuss and dialogue about that or provide staff any alternative direction. So, Mayor, if you'll indulge very quickly, I'll just ask Mr. Nail to remind the council what the recommendation from the Public Utility Advisory Board was relative to the future electric sources, and then we'll await any further direction that the council has. So, Mr. Nail, if you don't mind just giving a brief overview of what that recommendation was.
I don't have it in front of me. I apologize, but they recommended that the council begin the process of investigating future generation resources. The discussion that took place also involved looking at the eventual retirement of the combustion turbines, and recognizing that whether we want to talk about capacity or in-house generation, that's what's driving the conversation, is having a plan in place so that those combustion turbines can be retired without causing problems on our system.
And so, Mayor, then just to tie that back up and then defer to the council, that was, again, the reason we brought this evening. As Mr. Nail highlighted in his last presentation, we're down to a 3 to 8 year window to get this decision made, and the lead time associated with that is certainly going to be significant. So probably every bit of that minimum range of the window, the 3 years, and that's why we wanted to get this back in front of the council tonight. So I think we are in alignment with the Public Utility Advisory Board about making this a priority to look at and to discuss and make some decisions on, being decisive, to use the term from Mr. Nail's previous presentation, but wanted to just get any further direction from the council tonight prior to reintroducing that resolution for consideration, if that would be the council's desire.
Okay, so this is, I happen to have it in front of me, bill number 20705. It references the 2018 Energy Master Plan, which recommended the retirement of Blue Valley Plant. City Council Resolution 6511, which was the closure of the Blue Valley Plant, including 3 turbines before June 1st, 2020. Which has been done. The power purchase agreement for capacity with Oneta, which has been completed. I mean, these are just sort of review of actions that the council has already approved. So the recommendation is that the city council direct the city manager to evaluate all options and develop recommendations relative to replacing current peak load capacity resulting from the eventual retirement of the 6 combustion turbine generators. Such recommendations shall include staffing and potential transition plan for existing staff affected by retirement of the 6 combustion turbine generators. So this is in essence anticipating that the end of the end of their useful life is approaching, and the recommendation is to begin now the process of evaluating if and how we will replace that on-system generation. Is that accurate, Mr. Norris, Mr. Nail?
Yeah.
Okay, for your understanding of the recommendation of the PUAB. So since we were not able to discuss this at the council meeting, since it was postponed, I think this is an opportunity to ask questions. And then ultimately, I believe what the city manager is seeking is direction to place on whether or not to place this on a future council agenda for consideration and vote by the council. So comments or questions?
This is Dan Hobart. I'm for putting it back on the agenda.
Okay, that's fine. Yes.
I'm sorry, this is DeLucy. I'm just curious, is this just looking at capacity, Dan, and not energy?
It's
or are you looking at everything?
It's everything. It's just from what I understand, it's giving the thumbs up to Jim Nail and the city manager's office to figure out what we should do.
Madam Mayor, if you don't mind my weighing in there.
Mm-hmm.
This is indeed to put our foot as staff on the path of addressing at a minimum the peak issue, but largely I believe the PUAB's intent here was to look at this holistically and begin making those recommendations about how to proceed. So this would relate back to the PowerPoint you just saw from Mr. Nail and the final slide he had where we had some of those milestone checkpoints of where we would need to bring decisions forward for the Public Utility Advisory Board and the council. But this would be the first step of affirming. And again, because we've sort of chosen to do these more as one-offs than that holistic strategic plan that was recommended, this would be saying, yes, let's make this a priority and start working on that.
Mr. Walker, it's DeLucy again. I'm just, I'm a lawyer, so I just read the language I'm looking at, and it
Right.
just talks about current peak load capacity, and that's all it talks about. And so if you want to expand that for our consideration, I think that would be probably a really good thing to do. Because as written, it just talks about replacing peak load capacity. That's it.
So, council member, that was the previous action that the PUAB recommended and the council took action on last January. The current recommendation from the PUAB, which was made on November 19th from that group, I'll read it to you just because there is a difference and it's somewhat subtle. That action be taken to determine the most cost-effective and reliable source of energy for the ratepayers of IPL in the future. This may include discontinuing the current CT operations and begin seeking out baseload electric solution for our energy needs within SPP. So there's a little bit of the resolution approved last January focused on peak and capacity. And this one is a little bit more general, but does explicitly discuss baseload in it. I think a key term there is may include baseload solutions, but I think it could include many other things too that Jim has presented tonight.
Okay. And I'm much better with that than the restricted peaking. Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I was at that meeting also, and it was very, very plain that the PUAB was looking at alternatives just to cover the peak, not actually buying peak equipment. Just open it up so that the staff and city managers could come with some numbers that, like I said earlier, these numbers that Mr. Nell's provided is just, off the cuff. This is what they average. He'd go out there and negotiate things. I mean, a 1.8 million megawatt might be a $1 million megawatt when he gets done. I mean, it's all about how much you're buying, where you put it at, where they're coming from. I mean, you got, all kinds of moving parts here, but my understanding with this resolution is just open that can up so that we can get out here and see what's available and see the mix that staff can provide us and something that's adequate and cost savings. That's why I understood it.
Okay. I think I'm unmuted now. So we can, unless there's a objection, we can just ask the city manager to include this on the next council agenda, which would be January the 19th. Is that the correct date? Yeah. Okay. With the information that Mr. Norris provided. Okay, then that is what we will do. Next up is the IPL resiliency and cash balance policy, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, again, Madam Mayor and members of the council, this was an item that was considered by the council at your meeting last Monday evening, was voted down by the council 4-3. I have had some feedback from some of the council members who have asked that this item be reconsidered. Again, just in the interest of full transparency, we didn't want that to show back up on a agenda. That was an item that had a full public hearing, that had appeared before the PUAB, had a council study session. So just given the weight of the issue and the importance of it, we wanted to put this back on the study session first to seek the council's direction to bring that back again, so that the public would have a full week's notice if the council did intend to reconsider that matter. Just as a matter of a quick update, this was the item that would set a methodology for how we began to calculate the charter mandated reasonable surplus at Power and Light, so that we could begin to have adequate amount, and adequate being set by this methodology and reviewed annually and adjusted annually by the council. I was speaking to one of the council members. This is not the greatest example because the state doesn't always follow this, but this would be akin to the state's foundation formula for education, where in which a formula is set and then modified each year then to calculate an amount that should be utilized for that. So similar to that, this would set what our reserve balance would be. So again, just wrapping up, Mayor, this would be an item that we would request that the council bring back, and if they do, that they would do so by giving us direction tonight to place it on the January 19th agenda.
Okay, very good. Are there comments or questions that any council member wants to ask this evening? Okay, if there's no, oh yes, go ahead.
Sorry, this is John Fergus. I just jumped on, so I apologize for the tardiness here, but here I am.
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, this is...
Yes.
Go ahead.
Councilman DeLucy?
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. I just want to be sure that we're not double dipping when we're talking about cash reserve. And I'm looking at the utility cash reserve policy for electric that was provided in our materials. And it specifically says on the second paragraph that the cash reserve target will not include funds legally required for debt service. Okay. And then you go down 4 paragraphs and it says revenue risk includes the fixed cost representing the total amount of operating expenses to be fixed, and you add debt service and a necessary 10% coverage of that, as well as the pilot to the city. I mean, when we in 2017 talked about a cash reserve, we talked about how much money will it take to run the utility for 60 days. And we had a separate line for debt service. I just want to be sure that we are not double dipping some of these numbers in getting to the cash reserve. And that's my focus. And maybe I'll just talk to Mr. Nail about it in our conference, and he can explain it generally when we get together in public again next week, because I think that's a very important distinction.
Yes, ma'am, we can do that.
Okay.
Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Huff.
I've been looking that thing over pretty good. You know, as far as the all that, I just want to make sure that the second priority of this has to do with some rate reduction on this one. I believe this is the one, correct? Where we're talking about the excess funds, or is this just totally the what we're saving, keeping back? I mean, this is the part that's paying off the bond, the one that is callable. Or is that the next?
Yes. Well, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, that is the next item. If this policy were to be considered and approved by the council at some point in the future, then the follow-up item would be how that excess cash based on this methodology would be used.
I'm on a different computer tonight because I couldn't hear last week, so I can't see what's going on.
Okay, so this is several steps that we know of, and likely some that we haven't anticipated yet. But the first action would be to bring this back at our next council meeting for reconsideration from the council. If the policy were to gain approval from the council, then we move into how do we apply the policy.
Correct.
And you know, ideally that would take place rapidly so that the city manager can begin to include that in his budget preparations, which I'm pretty sure started on January 1st. You know, it's sometimes, I know, a challenge and to think about, okay, this in and of itself doesn't necessarily achieve the outcomes that we may individually, collectively, or our community desires, but you got to have the foundation there to be able to have the next discussion about how to apply it. Are there any other comments or questions?
Mayor,
yes.
just to be fully transparent here, the policy that was added to the agenda in the middle of the page, there's some language there that's underlined. That's additional new language that you didn't see the last meeting. And the goal there is to try to clarify and respond to some of the feedback we received at the meeting and after the meeting about this policy. So our hope is that addresses some of the concerns we received from the council and others about this policy. And so the bracketed information below each of these risk factors, that would not be part of the policy. That's just there to illustrate where we start here. But again, as we go into the budget process, we discuss those with the council, we review them with you, and then you would ultimately approve those. Okay.
You know,
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful so that we can set some benchmarks, but the council will make those determinations annually and working with the city manager and setting the budget. Is that correct? Yes, Councilman Huff?
Yes, I want to comment. If anybody gets a chance and they can look at the PUAB presentation from these guys, it was a lot more thorough than what we've seen, and maybe they can take their time and go through it. It was a lot more informational. I think we kind of got a brush job. I know that at the PUAB it was a lot more information provided, especially the things that Councilperson DeLucci's asking for. It was provided at that meeting and a lot more detail than what we've seen. So if anybody gets a chance to review that, it might be helpful for them too.
And this is DeLucci again. I'm jumping on what Councilmember Huff just said. I think that would be a wonderful idea for the PUAB, perhaps even in February, to make an annual report and look at these numbers and arrive at a recommendation separate and apart from when we finally get the budget in May from the city manager, because this is a big deal. And I am so overwhelmed in May when the city manager gives us the budget. I think we need to give this number a lot of time and a lot of consideration, and the PUAB is the place to do it, Councilmember Huff. I absolutely agree with you.
Okay. So if there is no objection, we will add this to the next council meeting on January the 19th. Okay. Finally, or not finally, we've got almost finally. The next is priorities for Independence Power and Light financial surpluses. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, again, Madam Mayor and members of the council, this relates to our conversation at our regular meeting last week. This was an item that was discussed at the Public Utility Advisory Board meeting, but relates specifically back to the conversation about what is deemed to be reasonable surplus and how that's applied. So these are some of the conversations related to debt service, and then also figuring out how and if this would be applied to rate reduction in accordance with the city charter. So this begins to set some priorities and policies from the council for any amount above and beyond what the current methodology would calculate to be out of the bounds of the reasonable cash flow and then deemed to be surplus. Again, we're asking that the council bring this item back in concert with the others as they all relate to one another and have this reconsidered at your January 19th meeting.
Okay. Are there comments or questions on this item? In the interim between the last meeting and tonight, I did request from our city attorney a summary of the Bondurant decision, which Law and Sarah Carnes was on this call for us for a while, but she's long gone because she had another commitment at 7 o'clock. But she provided, their law firm provided this summary for us, which I distributed to the council, and I've asked the city manager to distribute to the PUAB as well. I mean, throughout the PUAB, the priority setting that we've been trying to do from the council, the PUAB, and the administrative staff, clarity on the Bondurant decision is something that is consistent. I don't necessarily think that we should delve into this evening, but I found it to be very helpful. Specific, particularly, and I think what we're all focused on is being specific with the terminology and the language that we use, because it makes a difference. And the IPL priorities that were provided by the PUAB really reference the operating relationship between Independence Power and Light and the City of Independence in relation to the Bondurant decision. And the Bondurant decision really doesn't address at all operations. It addresses the use of funds. The operations is addressed in the city charter, which clearly gives the city manager authority over operations of all city departments, and specifically names the electric utility. So, I mean, I know I'm, maybe splitting hairs, but I would really encourage you to look at the PUAB to review what was provided to us by Law, because like many things, we think we know. I mean, it's like you think you know what it says, but it's good to refresh and really have a clear understanding of what it says. It's one of those items that we talk about a lot, so I thought it would be very helpful if everybody had a clear understanding of what the court decision was and how 40 plus years ago, and how that should be guiding us moving forward with these financial decisions. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that. And of course, that's a public document, so if anybody else cares to see it, we can certainly make it available. Are there any other comments or questions, discussion on this item tonight?
Madam Mayor, not on this item, but I'm just thinking, this is DeLucci again. I will be meeting with Mr. Nail with questions, and I don't want it to seem like I'm meeting in secret or anything. I mean, I can meet anytime on Wednesday, Mr. Nail, if we want to set a time now, and we can put it out as a public hearing, as far as I'm concerned, to have the public look at our discussion and listen to our discussion more in depth. Or is that not an appropriate thing to do, Madam Mayor?
It's completely fine. The city manager,
okay.
You have the city manager, if it's okay with the city manager, there's certainly nothing to prevent you from doing that.
Okay, then Mr. Nail, how about you and I get a conversation going tomorrow? We will set a specific time and we will have it advertised through the city clerk.
Absolutely.
Is that okay with you, Mr. Walker?
Wear your masks.
I will. Thank you.
Okay, so as the city manager said, this was another item that was postponed indefinitely, and so if there is no objection for the council, we will add this to the upcoming council meeting on January the 19th for consideration, I should say.
Could you read that ordinance again too? please?
Excuse me?
Could you read that one again?
This one is the recommendations. I won't go through all of the
Just give me a
background whereases. That the City Council of Independence resolves to follow the city charter and adopt financial policies when contemplating the findings of the financial analysis to be presented by PFM with regard to the electric utility fund. So we've had that presentation both at the council and PUAB. And then the section 2 is that in following these provisions, the City Council will prioritize any surplus funds in the electric utility in the following manner. That the first priority shall be the defeasance of outstanding municipal bonds, and the second priority shall be refunding the ratepayers of the electric utility.
Okay, yeah, all right. I'll just make sure I'm set right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that we do have a boards and commissions report from the city. If there's nothing else on that, we will move that forward to the next council agenda. Madam City Clerk, boards and commissions report.
Thank you. The first board is the Advisory Board of Health. We have recommendation to appoint Peter Muehlman. If the council doesn't have any objections to adding that to the next agenda, we'll create a resolution, have that added to the January 19th agenda.
Okay, are there any objections to bringing this forward for the next council meeting? Okay, hearing none, you can add that to the next agenda.
Thank you. Next is the Tourism Commission. There's recommendation made to reappoint Sam Ruche and Jennifer Vitella. If there's no objections from the council, we'll add that to the January 19th agenda.
Okay, is there any objection? Okay, we'll move that forward to the next agenda.
And finally, sorry.
Go ahead.
Finally, we have the Stormwater Control Oversight Committee. Recommendations been made to reappoint Ali Zaror. This is a Councilmember Perkins individual appointment. If there's no objection, we'll add an item to the next agenda.
Is there any objection? Okay, hearing none, we'll put that on the next agenda. Mr. City Manager, is that all, Becky? Okay.
It is.
City Manager, is there anything else this evening?
Nothing tonight. Thank you all.
Okay, we are adjourned.